Hey, it's Andrew again, your average jeweler, and today we're talking about watches. And we're not just randomly talking about watches. I want to actually talk about a big question right now, which is, are watches even still relevant? And I get this a lot. I don't know if you're wearing a watch, if you've never worn a watch, if you used to wear a watch, but I want to talk about some of the reasons that we're having this discussion and give a little background on watches. So let's go. If you haven't been to my channel before, I spend time trying to answer the general questions that I hear within the jewelry industry. And while today we're talking about watches, many times I'm trying to answer questions on gemstones, questions about jewelers in general, and I want to help you understand better. So if you're interested in learning, please subscribe and stay with me because we're going to cover a lot of different topics. But today, watches. Let's start with some background. The background of watches, or the history of watches, goes all the way back to the 16th century. Yes, that many years ago. That is a long time ago for something to mechanically keep track of the time. I'm sure if you thought about it, you'd probably realize that clocks have been around for a long time, and the technologies are similar, but for them to get it to a point where they could shrink it down into something that could be carried, that obviously took some time and some engineering. It was a pretty big feat at the time, and early on, royalty would have been the few instances where you would have seen a watch. It would have been worn as a pendant, and you may even see some pictures of some of the old kings of England or France wearing these big pendants that were in fact watches, although at that point you may still consider them a clock. So you get into the 1800s, and you actually have watches start to become more pocket watches. And while a lot of people contribute this very much to the railroad and having to keep accurate times of when trains are coming and going so that there aren't any miscommunications on something as important as train timing, you actually have people just with a general desire to know what time it is without having to be around a clock. And so pocket watches took off in a very big way in the 1800s. And as they figured out that technology more and more, many people could afford watches. Pocket watches kind of reached peak popularity in the 1900s. So the 20th century is when you just saw it explode, and almost everybody had a watch. Again, part of it being due to technology, and the other part of it being due to just that ability to have the time with you wherever you were. It was really quite a luxury to be able to know what time it was at any given time. Of course, like anything, watches continued to evolve, and you got into what we now know today as wristwatches. And wristwatches, it's a debatable topic. If you start researching it, a lot of different places have taken credit for the invention of the wristwatch. Cartier is one of them that has a lot of ties with their Dos Santos watch. But there are others that have staked a claim on that, so it's kind of an interesting discussion in itself. The point being, wristwatches started taking off, again, more than 1900s is when you started seeing wristwatches. And if you look back into World War I especially, you actually saw the implementation of what we consider field watches starting to take hold, and watches used in a very utilitarian way during World War I. Of course, that translated to World War II and beyond, and wristwatches continued to evolve into what we know today and the many different varieties that we have because of it. With all of that said, we can obviously say watches have changed a lot over time. But are they still relevant? That's the question today, and that's what I want to talk about. I have 4 questions within that I want to answer. And of course, you're going to hear some of my opinions at the end based on what I've seen and what I know. As usual, I have a question for you, and it's simple. Do you wear a watch? Have you ever worn a watch? Did you used to wear one and you got tired of it? Did you have a job that maybe made it difficult to wear a watch? These are some things I heard, and I'm curious what you have to say on it, so please let me know in the comments below. Do you wear a watch? If you don't, if you do, tell me why. So question number 1, are they even a necessity? This one, I hesitate giving a strong answer to because I actually do think it's more complex, but most people would say no, they're not a necessity. And I would tend to give that answer many times. If someone was to talk to me about watches and this question of relevance, the question of necessity almost always seems to come up. And I would usually say no, watches are not a necessity, but they are a convenience. And while the necessity part has a lot to do with phones being in our pocket that often can give us the time, and of course being in environments where there are many times clocks, whether digital or otherwise, they're not a necessity like they once were. We mentioned the railroad. They were a necessity. We think about the early 1900s, people getting to work on time, people having appointments, people just generally knowing when they should go to sleep. Watches were much more a necessity in times past. But does that make them irrelevant? Question number 2, are they desirable? And this one's a little bit more complicated because now you're getting into a bit of personal preference. However, I would much more strongly say that watches are desirable. Women like to wear jewelry. Watches are jewelry. So of course it would make sense that most women would like to have a nice watch, and they can choose many different styles. They don't have to choose the utilitarian ones that their grandmothers had, although their great-grandmothers may have had a very decorative watch. So again, that's a little off topic, but the point being, a lot of women can view watches as another piece of jewelry or a bracelet. As far as men are concerned, it's maybe the one instance where we can wear jewelry. Outside of a wedding band, most men are only going to wear a watch as a piece of jewelry. And it's a small area for us to showcase maybe a bit of our personality or maybe some of our interests. Watches have unique little things to them, not just aesthetic-wise, but feature-wise, that allow men to have a little piece of personality on their wrist. With all that said, I would say as a general rule, yes, watches are desirable. But that doesn't mean everybody wants one or that everyone likes wearing one. Question number 3 is, are they trendy? Are they just a trend? Are they kind of this fad where there's not really any practical purpose to them, but you're just wearing it because maybe it's popular? And I don't think this is the case either, because people that wear watches, even though they don't need them, they use them. And a lot of people feel much more confident and comfortable wearing a watch. I don't believe it's just a trend. You think about getting dressed up to go out somewhere. There's this idea of being complete, whether it's a jacket or a tie, whatever it might be for the situation. A watch, in many ways, is just part of being complete in being dressed. I know I would feel weird if I went out without socks, but not everybody would. In some jobs, if you show up without your tie, you feel a bit out of place. That's how I feel if I forget my watch, and I know a lot of people feel the same way. I hear it all day long when people come in for watch batteries. I feel so lost without my watch. Just having it for a day or two, I realize how much I need my watch. It's statements like these that remind me that a lot of people, while they don't need that watch to find the time, they appreciate it, they enjoy it, they rely on it. So I don't believe it's just a trend. And the 4th one, which may be the biggest question to this particular argument, are watches dying out? Are they just on this continual trajectory to Nowheresville? I don't think so, and I'm going to tell you why. The biggest reason why is, as I mentioned before, many people still like the idea of having a part of their personality that they can showcase. All this to say, watches are changing. But because they're changing, doesn't mean they're dying out. We have seen a huge growth in popularity, especially in men's watches. And I believe that's hugely for the reason that we're looking for areas that we can enjoy and appreciate, whether it's artistic or features. And then we add to that you have what we consider smartwatches. You have your Apple Watch and otherwise. You have some watches that look just like a regular watch, but they buzz or they give some kind of an indication when you have a notification on your phone or when an alarm goes off. And there are people that enjoy that. There are a lot of people that want that. Smartwatches are massively popular, but they're technically not more popular than traditional watches, which is interesting to note. And I think that it just shows one more area where people are wanting to showcase a part of their personality through their watch. Now, obviously, I don't prefer smartwatches, or maybe I shouldn't say obviously, but I don't prefer smartwatches, and I have several reasons why. That's not really why I'm talking to you today, but I want to emphasize, because of all these other things that we've discussed, watches, I don't see them dying out anytime soon. I have plenty of people that love to wear watches, and because of that, they have many different watches. Just like some women have a lot of different shoes, or scarves, or hats. Just like some guys have a ton of shoes themselves. Watches are in a very similar category. So you probably don't agree with me on every single thing that I said, but I do see it a lot, and on a daily basis, from people that are wearing watches. They want to know, aren't watches dying out? Are watches still relevant? These are people that themselves like watches, but they're hearing things from all over the place, and they don't know what to make sense of because they find themselves still enjoying a watch, and it's confusing that so many people say, oh, watches are dying out. Well, those are people that probably don't care for a watch, and that's fine, because again, they're not a necessity. But I find it interesting that many people who would have been given a watch when they were 10, 11, 12, 13, those years where it would have been typical to be given as a gift, they're given a cell phone instead, and then in their later teens or in their 20s, when they graduate college, when they get their first job, they go out and they buy themselves a watch, and they wear a watch for the rest of their life. Or they start collecting watches once they've had one or two because they start realizing this is something that I like, I enjoy it. So my conclusion is watches have changed. Watches are still very much relevant, and I don't see them dying out anytime soon. I see people continuing to wear them, and we'll probably talk watches in the future because I like them and I still see a lot of people out there that enjoy them. Let me know if you're one of them, please. I'd like to hear in the comments below. If you found any value in this video, or you liked it at all, please hit the like button, share it with those you think that might appreciate it, and if you want to keep learning with me, subscribe. I want to keep talking about watches and other jewelry related questions, so stay with me.